Alien ship lands in Atlantic, the bone-chilling unveiling that haunts us forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky into a blazing canvas of reds and oranges, a strange glow pierced through the veil of twilight over the Atlantic Ocean. Witnesses claimed it looked like a flaming star descending from the heavens, spiraling down towards the waves with an urgency that sent shivers down spines. It was an ordinary Friday evening in a bustling beach town, filled with laughter and the rhythmic crash of surf. But in that moment, a collective gasp echoed through the crowd as the ground shuddered beneath their feet, pulses quickened, and hearts raced with a primal mix of fear and excitement. The ship, if it could even be called that, landed on the water like a stone dropped into a pond, sending splashes cascading like fireworks. Its surface gleamed like liquid metal, reflecting colors that no eyes could comprehend. It hummed ominously, vibrating the very air, a low thrum that felt like it was carving into human souls. Some cried out, others stood frozen, entranced by the bizarre spectacle. Was this the end? The beginning? No one was sure, but the unknown weighed heavy on every mind. Just beyond the chaos, a rugged fisherman named Hank felt the tightness in his chest start to expand. He'd spent years on the water, seen storms and sunsets, but nothing compared to this. For him, it wasn't just fear, it was a looming feeling of doom mixed with an overwhelming curiosity that begged him to uncover the truth. The whispers around him grew. "Did you see that? And what is it?" Fluttered through the crowd, building a chorus of anxious speculation. But what truly struck him was how quickly everything had changed from a normal evening to a scene pulled straight from a sci-fi horror movie. As the crowd packed tighter, anticipation swirled like the winds above them. An eerie silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the occasional gasp or murmured questions. Everyone wondered who or what was inside. Could they be friendly? Or were they here to harvest human souls? The air crackled with tension, time stretching unbearably as if the universe were holding its breath. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Just then, the gleaming craft shuddered once more, and a blinding light burst forth, illuminating the faces of the terrified onlookers. A figure emerged from the ship, dark and angular, moving with a grace that was both beautiful and unsettling. Gasps turned to screams as they saw it step onto the water. Could it walk on water? As the figure drew closer, every heart beat louder. Questions flooded minds. What would it mean? Tears filled Hank's eyes. Hope fought with fear in a tumultuous battle. The world was about to change forever, and he stood at the forefront, wondering if he was ready for the truth of whatever lay ahead. The night felt pregnant with possibilities, and only time would unveil the chilling secrets hidden within the brilliance of their new reality. The figure continued to glide toward the shoreline, its elongated limbs drawing gasps from the crowd. A blend of fascination and horror painted their faces, eyes wide and mouths agape. Hank could barely breathe, his pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the rising whispers of the townsfolk. What was happening? As the being drew nearer, a radiant light enveloped its form, casting a shimmering aura across the water's surface. The crowd fell silent, hearts pounding like war drums. Fear clung to the air like moss, yet fascination sparked an eerie thrill. Would this creature speak? Would it attack? 100 questions darted through the crowd's collective mind, but all they could do was watch, frozen like deer in headlights. With each delicate step, the being's features began to take shape. Its skin glimmered, reminiscent of midnight skies filled with distant stars. It had no visible face, yet something in its posture suggested it was studying the crowd, its invisible eyes assessing. The space between Hank and the figure narrowed, though it felt as vast as the galaxy itself. Suddenly, like a clap of thunder, the figure raised an arm. The sound erupted, reverberating through the air, shaking the very ground beneath them. People stumbled back, clutching one another, eyes wide with disbelief. Hank, fueled by a surge of determination, stepped forward. He could feel the heat radiating off the figure, a combination of dread and strange allure urging him onward. "Wait! What do you want?" Hank shouted, his voice cracking against the stillness. To his astonishment, the being stopped. The world felt like it tilted on its axis as the air thickened with anticipation. A vast energy pulsed from the entity, its arm lowering ever so slightly. Hank's heart raced. It was as if time had stopped, each breath amplified into a thunderous roar. "What do you hear?" came an echoing voice, resonating not from the creature's mouth, but from within his own mind. The deep baritone sent shivers up his spine. "What?" Hank breathed, unable to process what had just happened. Murmurs flared around him as others began to break from their stupor, glancing at each other and back to Hank. They grasped at the echoes of the question, intrigue and terror blooming in every heart. "What do you hear?" The voice pressed again, more insistent this time, a dark serenity lacing the words. The crowd buzzed answers lost in the swell of confusion. Hank closed his eyes, silencing the chaos around him. What did he hear? The ocean sang to him, the whispers of the wind entwined with the crashing waves. Beneath it all, a pulse, maybe his own, thrummed louder, intertwining with the voice. It was a call strong, hypnotic. He felt his body sway, as if beckoned by an unseen force. I hear the ocean," he said, unsure why his admission ignited a ripple of energy that coursed through the crowd. The alien's form shifted, the glow intensifying, and the voice became a symphony of chaotic notes swirling through the air. "And what does it tell you?" Hank opened his eyes, trembling. His heart seized in realization. The ocean was more than just water, it carried a message, a deep understanding. All around him, the townsfolk seemed to lean in, each soul drawing upon their own insight, straining to capture the truth hidden within the sound. Suddenly, the being raised both arms, eyes unseen narrowing as if to discern the answers buried deep within the onlookers' hearts. "Together, you will awaken," it declared, and the resonating voice transcended language, cracking through the layers of reality itself. Each word echoed like a portent in Hank's mind, sending crackles of electricity through his veins, but before he could process the weight of those words, another rumble cut through the air from the ocean, a disturbance, a rise of dark, ominous waves swelling behind the figure. Was something else approaching? Hank's heart dropped. Would this be a call to unity, or an ominous sign of destruction? The air grew thick with dread and anticipation, an ancient promise of something monumental. Something was coming for them all, and the revelation could change everything. In that moment of stillness, a more profound question loomed. What if awakening was not the answer they sought, but a prelude to despair? What chaos waited beyond the first gentle touch of connection? As that thought swirled in his mind, a shadow eclipsed the glowing figure. Hope and dread collided in his chest, and Hank realized the real truth was just beginning to unfold on the horizon. The air crackled with tension as everyone turned to follow the dark waves surging toward the beach. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Hank's heart raced, not just from fear but also from a strange yearning for clarity, a need to know what was surfacing before him. The waves parted like a curtain, and out of the darkness emerged a colossal shape that struck terror into the hearts of onlookers, the silhouette of a ship, unlike anything ever seen. Its silver hull shimmered in the dying light, each reflection seemingly twisting with malevolent intent. It hovered above the water, defying gravity, casting a long shadow over the trembling crowd. Was this the herald of destruction? Or was it a force for change? The alien figure remained still, its demeanor almost serene, as if utterly unfazed by the looming ship. Hank felt a pull, a gravitational shift in the universe. He took a hesitant step closer. The surrounding chaos faded into a distant hum, leaving just him and the enigmatic being. It didn't seem hostile, rather, it felt as if it was waiting perhaps for him. "Who are you?" he asked, voice barely a whisper, urgency painting his words. Instead of a verbal response, the figure raised its arm once more. The gesture inspired echoes of past dreams, of visions he couldn't recall, but somehow, deep down, he understood. A soft pulse echoed from the entity, resonating with something primal within him. As the colossal ship settled to a gentle rest on the water's surface, a blinding light erupted from its core. Hank shielded his eyes, holding his breath. Waves crashed violently against the shore, as if trying to warn them all of what lay ahead. But curiosity overcame fear, deep as the ocean tide, drawing him ever closer. The crowd shifted uneasily but remained fixed in place, gripped by an inexplicable mixture of dread and wonder. It's just a trick. This can't be real. Someone shouted, yet those words felt hollow against the dread pulsing through the air. The figure's voice boomed through Hank's mind again. Hark! Do you hear it now? The awakening is near. The alien energy danced around him, and with it came an ancient familiarity. Could it be that the echoes he felt were not novel at all? Yet the whispers of the ocean still swirled chaotically, more urgent now, demanding panicked responses. Trust. You hold the key. What did that mean? Hank felt the weight of expectation from the crowd, eyes drilling into him. He could sense their hopes and insecurities churning under the surface, all laid bare. Something monumental was unfolding, and he felt unprepared. Just then, piercing shrieks fractured the night air. Hank jumped as small tendrils erupted from the ship, writhing and reaching out like fingers. Panic flooded through him as the crowd began to scatter, screaming in terror. But a sense of calm washed over him, something echoed within, urging him not to flee. Stand firm. The being commanded silently, its intent imbued in every thought. The truth you seek lies ahead. He turned his gaze to the ship and watched as the tendrils coiled around, an unmeasurable energy flowing toward the beach, funneling into the vast unknown. Each pulse somehow became louder until the beating of the waves synced with the rhythm of his heart. Join with us. Embrace your awakening. What did that mean, to awaken? The thought spiraled through Hank's mind, electrifying every nerve. He turned back to the panic, the chaos unfolding, but it all felt distant, muted. But then something else crashed into his consciousness. A looming specter of doubt. Was he the one to unite them? Or was he really just a pawn in a game far larger than he could fathom? Before he could act, another rumble reverberated from the ship. A door began to open, a yawning abyss, promising answers but cloaked in uncertainties. From the shadows, luminous shapes could be seen becoming clearer as they marched toward the beach, their intentions unclear yet undeniably potent. Hank's world shrank, just him standing between the alien and the frightened town. The moment hung suspended like a breath held too long. As the figures neared, he felt the weight of choice, the primal instinct to flee or face it, but something stirred deep inside him. It was his moment to decide. Would he be the voice of connection or the herald of impending doom? As he moved forward, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and thrill, the question loomed larger than life. What awaited him, the answer, or the end? In that moment, Hank stepped closer, prepared to confront the unknown. A hush blanketed the beach as the figures emerged from the ship, gliding forward with an otherworldly grace. Hank's pulse quickened, dread tightening its grip around his throat. What they looked like was still obscured by the brilliant light emanating from the ship, but he could sense an intensity in their presence that sent shivers down his spine. Each step felt like a thunderclap, echoing in his chest. The once chaotic crowd now held its breath, suspended in a moment that felt both eternal and fleeting. Hank was caught in the eye of the storm, and as the luminous figures drew nearer, he could almost taste the charged energy in the air, bitter, electric, alive. Stay back. Someone finally shouted, breaking the spell that had gripped the crowd. Panic surged anew. A mother pulled her child away, shielding them with her body. Others erupted into a frenzy, running in every direction with screams that echoed through the night, but Hank stood firm. The figure now discernible amidst the brilliance was taller than any human, radiating an ethereal glow that lit up the darkness around them. Its features were sharp, almost regal, with eyes that seemed to pierce through him, reading his soul. There was a familiarity in its gaze that compelled him to step closer, even as instinct screamed at him to turn and run. "Do not fear us," the alien voice resonated in Hank's mind. "We come not to harm, but to awaken." Awaken. The word rolled through his mind like a tidal wave. But awaken to what? His heart raced with questions, with doubts, with the nagging fear that too much was at stake. What if this was a deception? What if the answers he sought were buried beneath shadows far darker than he could imagine? Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from the alien's hand, sending a shockwave that pulsed through Hank. The pain was visceral, a sharp bite that coursed through every fiber of his being. He gasped, staggering back, collapsing to his knees. The pulsating light enveloped him, and he felt the stirrings of memories, of ancient echoes that he could not decipher. Images flashed before him: civilizations, beggars on city streets, families huddled together, and an endless expanse of stars stretching across the blackness of space. "I can show you," the being continued, its voice calm yet overwhelming. "The truth that has long been hidden. The awakening you seek is not just for you but for all." The crowd, now cautiously gathering again, glanced at Hank with wide eyes, their expressions a mix of fear and burgeoning hope. They were afraid, yes, but they also craved connection. A flicker of unison sparked between them and Hank, weaving through the panic like a lifeline. Could he really be the key? Hank's mind raced with the weight of his choices, every possibility branch stretching into the unknown. But there was no time. The pulse of energy intensified, creating a rhythm that thumped in unison with his heart. "Please," Hank murmured, every ounce of doubt ebbing away as the call to awaken flowed through him. "Reveal the truth." The alien figure stepped closer, narrowing the space between them. A soft light enveloped him like a warm embrace, melting fears and doubts away. Hank felt the tendrils of connection weave through his mind, forming threads of understanding that momentarily silenced the chaos surrounding him, and then, just as he tasted the full blossoming of enlightenment, a piercing sound shattered the serenity: a shriek of metal against metal, an ominous groan that echoed from within the ship. The vessel trembled, light flickering like a dying star, fracturing the moment of unity. Hank's heart raced. What is happening? Disruption. We must act swiftly. The urgency in the voice cracked through the calm, sending ripples of panic back through the assembled crowd. As the luminous figures began to retreat, revealing a strange silhouette lurking within the ship, Hank's instincts kicked in once more. Save them or run? The choice weighed heavily, every second burned into his mind, a crucible of decisions. Hank stood, resolute despite the turmoil. "No!" he shouted. "We're not leaving. Not yet." But as he called out, dark shadows started to pour from the ship, engulfing the shore, blurring lines between fear and heroism. The unknown awaited, and yet he could not turn back. What would he choose in the face of the impending chaos? Forward into the darkness or back to safety? The ground trembled with an impossible weight as he felt its presence behind him, rising ominously. The conclusion hung in the air, thick with the promise of revelation or despair. "Join me!" he yelled one last time, his voice cracking against the tide of uncertainty. Would he be the connection to something greater, or would he be swallowed whole by the shadows creeping ever closer? These decisions, this moment, loomed forebodingly, leaving only one question suspended in the air: what horrors waited just beyond the light? The shadows twisted and writhed, a living darkness sweeping over the beach with a mind of its own. Hank's heart pounded in his chest, its rhythm drowning out the panicked cries around him. He felt the air charge, thickening with tension as the dark fog crept closer. It was as if a predator adorned in malice was poised to strike. "Get back!" he shouted again, the desperation in his voice echoing against the relentless backdrop of terror. But who would listen? People were scrambling, the crowd morphing into a swarm of panic. Some stumbled, falling to the ground as they tried to escape the impending chaos. The shimmering figures stepped back, their light fading like the last glimmers of sunset. "Stay with us," The lead figure called, its voice pulsing in the air, the trust and urgency spilling into the crowd like a slow-moving tide. Hank took a step forward, fighting against the instinct to flee. The darkness reached for him, tendrils like grasping hands, yearning for warmth. It felt cold, hungry. Just the thought of being enveloped by it sent the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. But the aliens. They held the key, didn't they? Each flicker of light from their forms pushed back the shadow, if only for an instant. Help us. Help me understand. Hank bellowed again, though his voice felt small against the monstrous swell of fear that erupted through the gathering. As if responding to his plea, a brilliant light shot from the alien's outstretched hands, illuminating the encroaching darkness in a vibrant wave. Shadows shrieked and recoiled, retreating for the briefest moments like bats escaping from sunlight, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Yes. Hank felt a surge of hope. Could they fend off the shadow? The moment hung, fragile like glass. He dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could harness the light against the encroaching chaos. But the brightness was flickering. Even the aliens seemed strained, as though their power was drawing thin. Suddenly, with a thrust that felt like the ground being pulled from under him, a wave of darkness surged forward, swallowing the light. Hank's breath caught in his throat. The crowd screamed, a cacophony of pure dread. Darkness flowed into Hank, wrapping around his body like greedy smoke, sapping his strength. He felt it scrape against his skin, as if clawing for something deeper, something hidden in the recesses of his soul, a part of him that longed for truth but also trembled at being discovered. Fight it. A voice rang in his mind, his own, rising above the din like a harbinger of hope. He thought of the faces in the crowd. The mother clinging to her child, the dazed teenager staring wide-eyed, the couples grasping each other in terror. They needed him. Hank stumbled but forced his eyes on the alien light, a beacon amidst the darkness. I want to let you take us. He yelled, summoning every ounce of courage from deep within. Ignoring the chill creeping into his bones, he took a step forward, then another, reaching his hand toward the luminous figures. A surge of warmth flared in his chest as he connected with their light, feeling it pulse through him. Images collided in his mind, the pain of humanity, the echoes of long-lost civilizations, the deep connection that tethered their souls together across the universe. Then, in the distance, a horn blared, a response that turned Hank's attention. He looked, wide-eyed, as a fleet of military vessels cut through the surf, lights flashing in unnerving patterns. Their presence was a promise of safety but also a threat looming on the horizon. Stay away. He murmured as the ships glided toward the shore. Would they break the fragile bond of hope or amplify the chaos before him? The tension crackled in the air. In seconds, Hank had to make a choice: join forces with the ethereal figures, or back away in fear as the growing storm brewed behind him. What was he willing to risk? His fate intertwined with theirs, a gamble that might either save them or lead them into oblivion. The looming questions dug at him like nails. What would he do next, and what would it mean for all of humanity? Would the answers be the salvation they craved or the end of everything? The ground shook like an angry beast as the military vessels neared the shore, slicing through the waves with a forceful promise. Hank's stomach churned at the sight, a sinking dread pooling in his chest. He could practically hear the clamor, gunfire, shouted orders, and the desperate cries of those swept away by chaos. It was all coming for him. Get clear. A soldier shouted, a frantic urgency echoing in the air. His movements were sharp, commanding. Hank felt the stark contrast: one man fighting against the tide of darkness while another sought to impose order amid disarray. But Hank knew deep down the soldiers didn't understand yet. They had no idea that the deeper threat lay not just in the shadows creeping in, but in the very hearts of those who stood around him. He turned back to the beings of light, their shapes fostered a flickering glow. Despite the chaos spilling forth, he sensed something in their eyes, a shared resolve. The darkness writhed, almost impatient. Shadows twisted in spirals as if it hungered for them all. Hank could feel the pull, like a magnetic force that tugged at his very being. He swayed, trying to resist, but their voices whispered through the edges of his mind, growing louder, demanding his surrender. Join us. Panic ignited inside him. Would this be a fight for survival, or was it an invitation to a darkness far worse than fear itself? No, he shouted, his voice barely piercing the roar of the approaching ships. We won. Be taken. In that moment, he glimpsed the mother with her child, the terrified teenager, the people clinging to hope. They were not just spectators in this unfolding nightmare, they were the battleground. Hank inhaled a deep breath, filling himself with a sense of purpose that shimmered like the light surrounding the aliens. He stepped forward, the barrier of darkness pulsating wildly against his skin, but he pressed on. Together. He yelled, rallying the crowd with a fervor he didn't know he possessed. We're not alone. Look. The faces turned toward him, expectant, trembling with unspoken fears. Their eyes held a flickering spark that ignited the collective will to resist, like ember igniting to flame. The alien figures moved closer, their light growing, as if fueled by the shared determination of the crowd. Hank felt a jolt, a connection that bridged the divide between extraterrestrial and human. This was his moment, a choice that could lead them out of obscurity or plunge them into deeper chaos, but even as hope surged, the nearest ship blared its horns again, sending a wave of despair crashing through the crowd. Fire! A voice bellowed, and gunfire erupted like lightning tearing through the sky. Hank's heart raced in terror. No! He cried, without thinking. The soldiers aimed toward the shadows, their flashlights piercing the gloom in an effort to dispel the tangible terror. But with each shot fired, Hank felt the flickering bond they had forged begin to flicker, like a candle threatened with the wind. The aliens faltered, their light dimming under the fear-induced wrath of human power. The tendrils of dark surged in retaliation, wrapping around Hank's throat. Shadows howled, responding to the cries of the wounded. What have we done? Hank thought in horror. Each shot rang through the air like a death knell for the hope he had tried to kindle. Could they possibly be fighting the very key to their salvation? The darkness surged, burning brighter, clawing toward him. Hank could feel sweat trickling down his brow as he fought against fear, hurling himself toward the light. Would it save him, or consume him whole? Behind him, a scream echoed into the cacophony, freezing him in place. A familiar face, someone he didn't dare admit he couldn't lose, scrolling through the panic-stricken crowd. Help! The woman cried, reaching out, her expression trapped between hope and despair. As Hank turned, something shattered inside him, the flicker of light dimming in his heart. Would he reach her in time? Or would he watch the darkness claim yet another innocent soul? Hank's heart tore as he spun around, driven forward by the haunting desperation in her voice. The chaos swirled around him, gunfire clapped like thunder, and shouts filled the air, becoming a deafening backdrop to his racing thoughts. The woman, Sarah, was trapped somewhere amid the broiling panic. He had to get to her. Stay close. He shouted to the people surrounding him, but they were lost in fear, eyes darting everywhere. He forced his way through, clutching his stomach against the anxiety tearing at him. Each step felt like wading through molasses, heavy and suffocating. Please, God, he whispered as he pushed through the crowd. The darkness pulsed, and every footfall beat like a drum in a funeral march. Shadows recoiled, seemingly alive, eager to wrap around any escape they could find. They taunted him, whispering treacherous words that flared with each heartbeat. Join us. Squeezing his eyes shut, he shut out their siren calls. The realization hit him like a freight train, fear was their weapon. He could feel it, a chilling desire creeping in. They hungered for panic. But despair was not the end. Not now. Not yet. Sarah. He called, desperation spilling from his mouth. The crowd shifted, forming an angry tide under him, yet he dug deep and pressed on. Closer. He had to reach her. That spark of hope flickered within him again, timid but burning. Suddenly, he saw her framed by the riotous shadows. She was struggling against a group of terrified people, their collective panic doing what the darkness could not. The darkness loomed closer, ready to swallow them whole as it hungered for chaos. He sprinted, adrenaline coursing through him, and stretched out his arm just as the tendrils of shadow lunged towards her. Sarah! He could only hope he'd be in time. In a split second, the world narrowed to just her and him. The squeezed air ignited with emotional intensity, each breath solidifying a promise between them. Then, the shadows rushed in, dark fingers clawing at the edges of her body, and he threw himself forward, the instinct to save her overriding every other fear. The impact jolted them, and he fought to hold onto her arm as she gasped in surprise that he pulled her close, wrapping both arms around her as panic poured toward them, desperate to drag them into a void of despair. "We need to stand together," he shouted, urging the others around them to look alive, to unite against the ever-encroaching darkness. But then, a burst of light, the dark shadows winced and recoiled, shrieks piercing the air like 1,000 banshees. The soldiers were firing again, this time recklessly. Hank glanced back, something in him crumbling as he saw the soldiers shooting wildly, their focus gone. They weren't targeting the shadows but instead the very people they were supposed to save. Chaos engulfed them, and the remaining flicker of hope dimmed dangerously. "Hank!" Sarah cried, clutching him tightly, panic radiating off her. "Stay close," he urged, gripping her tighter, but fear clawed at the edges of his resolve. The very people they needed, soldiers, allies, defenders, were becoming another kind of enemy, caught in confusion and the surge of power they felt. With the shot of revelation coursing through him, Hank seized the moment. "We have to stop them." He pushed against the shadows, drawing Sarah into the fray, the glowing light of those otherworldly beings growing brighter as if sensing the risk of humanity's self-destructive turn. "Join us," the voices whispered louder, stronger, beckoning them like drowning men calling for help. Hank stared into Sarah's frightened eyes. "Trust me. We have to fight back. Together, we can turn this." But the air thickened with a new wave of despair, crashing down around them. All at once he realized the ultimate price: uniting the light and ferocity of that darkness within themselves was their only chance. Would they overcome their own inner turmoil, or would the shadows consume them both? As he stood at the precipice, he could hear the shadows hooting, hungry for surrender. "Come fight with us," they suggested. But could he really overcome the darkness, or had they already succumbed to it? The air crackled with an energy Hank couldn't place, but it wasn't good. Right in front of him, chaos swirled like a tempest, people stumbling and screaming, fear painting their faces in thick strokes. As he pulled Sarah closer, he could feel her trembling. Each frantic heartbeat resonated between them, a shared rhythm of dread. Gunfire erupted again, the sharp cracks like whip snaps in the air. "Get down!" Hank shouted as he ducked instinctively, dragging Sarah with him to the ground just as bullets flew overhead. The world morphed into a cacophony of distorted shouts and frantic movement, but even as the horrors unfolded around them, there was another presence looming. The creeping shadows danced ever closer, their presence suffocating, almost tangible. They seemed to pulse, alive with a dark intent that sent chills racing down Hank's spine. "They want us to fall," he thought, his voice just a whisper in his own mind. Through the haze of confusion, Hank's gaze darted to Sarah. "We can't let them win," he yelled above the din, locking eyes with her. He saw the flicker of resolve there, a tiny fire igniting in the depths. Just then, a figure emerged from the blinding white light, the light of the soldiers' guns. It was a man in uniform, wild-eyed and panting, barreling toward them like he was chased by demons. "This way!" he screamed, waving his arm in urgency. Before Hank could register anything else, the man was engulfed in shadows. They twisted around him, dragging him into the void. Hank's stomach churned. It can take anyone, he realized, dread settling heavily in his chest. "Stay focused." He turned back to Sarah, grabbing her hand tightly as they began to navigate through the crowd pushing against them. We need to rally the others. There's strength in numbers. As they moved, Hank noticed others were gathering, fear still shining in their eyes but now ignited by a flicker of determination. He waved his arms, imploring them to listen. We can't let the darkness claim us. We fight or we die. We can't lose ourselves to fear. The murmur rippled through the mass of people. Some began to shout back, rallying against the shadows with weak, unsteady cries, but it was something. A sense of collective defiance grew, threading a fragile bond of hope amongst them, but the shadows were persistent, curling back almost instantly, sensing the strength they could siphon from the fear. Join us, the whispers clawed at the edges of Hank's mind again. No. He shook his head violently, forcing himself to focus, to fight. They were not going down without a struggle. Let us move. Sarah's voice rang out, piercing through the fear. She pulled on his arm, her voice sounding stronger now, and Hank felt a swell of pride despite the chaos. Together, they pushed forward, breaking through the fear. With every step, he could feel the light-refracted shadows nipping at their heels, ever closer. It felt like they were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Hank's heart pounded as they moved toward the last semblance of order, soldiers struggling to regain control, but just then, above the gunfire, an unholy scream erupted. One of the soldiers had turned, firing his weapon at the group they were desperately trying to unite. Hank froze as the realization slammed into him. Run! Hank screamed, dragging Sarah back. But it was too late. The darkness surged, spinning toward the chaos. From the edge of the shadows emerged a massive shape, something solid, something unnatural. It hovered, pulsating with an ominous glow. Drops of crimson pooled on the ground, staining the earth as panic swept through the crowd like wildfire. Hank felt his breath catch in his throat. With disbelief washing over him, he realized this was more than just a dark force, it was a beacon, forged in malice, leading them all toward a fate they could neither fathom nor outrun. As the ground trembled beneath them, Hank's mind struggled against fear. They needed a plan, a way to harness courage. They couldn't fold to the shadows, even if they seemed to thrive on despair, but was it already too late? Hold on, Sarah. We need to stick together. He cried, the words laced with urgency, but the shadows billowed ominously around them, a storm ready to swallow everything whole. A presence that promised despair. Would Hank rise to the challenge ahead, or would the darkness finally pull them under? The shadows shifted menacingly, an overwhelming darkness that swallowed the light. Hank's instincts roared to life, urging him to act, but dread gnawed at his resolve. He took a breath, trying to compose himself. We move. He yelled into the chaos, clutching Sarah's hand tight enough to anchor them both. Where? She shouted back, her voice strained with fear. Anywhere but here. Hank shouted, spotting an alleyway just beyond the masses. If they could slip through, it might provide a moment of respite. He pulled Sarah toward it, dodging the chaos and glancing back at the swirling maelstrom of panic, but the massive shape from the shadows stirred, and with it came the sound of grinding metal, a discordant symphony that twisted Hank's stomach into knots. The effulgent glow pulsed from the creature, casting sickly shadows that danced around them like specters ballrooming with death. They pushed through the crowd, stumbling over debris. Each scream pierced through the air like an arrow. Panic radiated, cascading endlessly forward, consuming everything in its path. Each step felt as if they were moving through molasses, the shadows grasping at their heels, eager to drown them in despair. Help us, someone cried out from a few feet away, their body pinned under a fallen sign. Hank felt a pang of empathy claw at him. This was a singular moment, a choice to make. They're dragging too many down. He shouted to Sarah. The people around them were falling deeper into the chaos, and Hank hesitated. But we can't just leave him. His heart twisted in distress. Choice. Sarah barked, kneeling to help him as she looked at Hank with fierce eyes. We make the choice to save ourselves or get swallowed in this madness. In that instant, the decision crystallized within him. He steeled himself against the weight of morality pressing down on his conscience. "Forgive me," he murmured before pulling Sarah onward, their feet pounding against the pavement, the alley beckoning them like the last light before nightfall. As they dodged into the narrow space, Hank glanced back. The crowd had fractured, with shadows coiling around the fallen like vipers preparing to strike. "Did you see that?" Hank's breath came out in quick, heavy puffs. "It was alive." "That thing not now," Sarah urged, urgency attached to every word. "We have to find a way out." They pressed deeper into the alley, a grim refuge from the encroaching terror. The sound of running water echoed against the brick walls, a shallow stream weaving through the dampness. It was eerily calm, far removed from the chaos outside, but the moment of peace shattered as the oppressive darkness swirled behind them, spilling into the alley. Sarah's voice trembled. "We have to go," he urged, adrenaline surging as he scanned the alley for an escape. The shadows writhed closer, whispering promises of despair that gripped at his throat. They needed a plan, an ally, something more than just instinct. "We can't run forever." Sarah's voice held a tremor of desperation, each word thick with panic. "But maybe we won't have to fight this alone." Hank thought of the group they'd tried to rally. If they managed to band together again, but that depended on reaching them first. In that fleeting moment of hope, a distant blaring siren chimed through the air, a sound of urgency that made Hank's heart leap. It was a signal, a call, perhaps. He clenched his fists. What if the soldiers, what if they can stop it? As if echoing Hank's thoughts, a roar erupted outside, following by an unnerving silence that settled like icy lead in his stomach. "Did they?" Sarah whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "We have to find out." Hank took a breath, adrenaline coursing through him. "We can't let that thing have any more of us." But as they made their way back towards the alley exit, the shadows intensified, dark fingers stretching toward them like a closing trap. Hank's resolve solidified, but a flicker of doubt crept in. What could they do against something so powerful? Before he could voice his worries, the sound of heavy footsteps thundered closer, breaking the silence. Hank felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. Were the soldiers coming, or was something worse lurking just around the corner, waiting for its moment to strike? Hank's heart drummed fiercely in his chest as the shadowy tendrils pulsed closer. The thought of Sarah, the town, humanity echoed in his mind, creating a swell of determination. He wouldn't let despair win today. "Let us go," he whispered, gripping Sarah's hand tighter, and they surged toward the alley exit. As they stepped into the chaos once more, the moonlight dimmed beneath the weight of the ominous ship hovering above. Gunfire filled the air, and Hank's stomach dropped as he witnessed soldiers hurriedly firing at the shadows, each crack of the weapon feeling like a step toward destruction. "Stay close," Hank yelled, forcing his way through the throng. Desperation clawed at him, but something deeper, a conviction, kept him moving. "Get together," he shouted, rallying the scattered townsfolk. Every person was a thread, stretching to weave a tapestry of resistance against the shadows creeping ever closer. "We need to trust each other. We need to fight together." The crowd turned, eyes wide, flickers of hope igniting as they began to form a line, only for the darkness to erupt into a whirlwind of chaos. Hank pressed forward, a charged energy igniting in his core, daring to take a stand. The beings of light pulsed rhythmically, their forms stabilizing against the tides of fear. "Together!" Hank shouted again, glimpsing the mother with her child and the teenager. "Remember why we fight." His voice soared above the chaos, piercing through the haze as they gathered around him, steeled against the encroaching gloom. The glow of the aliens brightened, illuminating the group with a golden hue. Hank felt a wave of warmth surround him, life surging through the bond they forged. The energy radiated, warding off the dark shadows momentarily. "Now move!" he yelled, and the crowd surged forward, united, as one. They rushed into the fray, trusting one another, forming walls of human strength against the creeping despair. just as they collided with the dark tendrils, a resounding harmony echoed overhead. The luminous aliens flickered, their forms blending into one another as a shield of shimmering light enveloped them. Trust. The voice resonated through Hank's mind once more, a beacon cutting through the chaos. Suddenly, the shadows writhed violently, shrieking in rage as the soldiers advanced. A flash of light exploded from the ship, bright and blinding, forcing Hank to squint and shield his eyes. It was a response, a rapid flicker of energy harmonizing with their collective resolve, pushing against the darkness. Hank felt that decisive moment teetering delicately. Could they truly push back, or would fear shatter their connection? Hold together, he urged, pulling Sarah closer. With each step, he could feel the power coursing through them, minds linked with purpose, amplifying their courage against the weight of dread. Some soldiers had broken ranks, now facing the shadows, transformed by their confusion. In that moment, fear and humanity morphed into defiance. "We can't hurt each other," Hank shouted to the soldiers as he inched closer. "This darkness thrives on our fear. We must fight it together." His words flowed like urgency, spinning a thread of connection among them all. The soldier who stood closest, wild-eyed yet curious, hesitated. "What do you want?" he shouted, caught between instinct and enlightenment. "To awaken. To trust," Hank pleaded, the ground beneath trembling not only with chaos but with hope. The soldiers blinked, hesitant, but Hank could sense the shifting tide. They turned and fired into the fray, channeling energy collectively as the shadows recoiled. With the soldiers bolstered by the townsfolk and the aliens drawing strength from their unity, the tide began to shift. "Onwards!" Hank bellowed, his voice invigorated with vigor. The crowd surged as the shadows shrieked, biting against the luminous power rising around them. The whispers diminished, morphing into anguished howls as light surged forward, dissolving darkness into fleeting tendrils. They pushed through, a heartbeat of resolve, and with one final exhale, Hank joined the energy, pulsating through them all. The alien figures glimmered brighter, launching bursts of brilliant light against the encroaching shadows once and for all. With a monumental crash of energy, something gave way. The shadows faltered. The twinkling pale light erupted from Hank, and suddenly, the tide turned. The shadows reeling away, collapses folding in on themselves like paper losing its form. As stillness settled, the remnants of the darkness vanished, leaving only the shimmer of light behind. Hank looked around, breaths heavy with relief as he took in the stunned faces of the townsfolk and soldiers. They had done it. A cacophony of cheers broke through, echoes of survival resonating like music in the air. Hank turned, meeting Sarah's gaze, her fear replaced with a radiant smile. "We fought together," Hank whispered, pulling her into a hug. No words encapsulated what they had achieved. A connection forged in fear had transformed into triumph. As he looked up to the stars shining vividly now, a gentle wind swept through the beach, carrying the promise of new beginnings, a message of awakening entwined in hearts. Together, he breathed and felt the light pulsate within him, a reminder that humanity's strength lay not just in survival, but in embrace of trust. This was only just the beginning, the dawn of something profound, something they would carry forth. Now, as your heart swells with emotions of victory, I need you to act. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support makes all the difference. Let us take this journey together.